The year is 1941, and a bored teenager named Jean Faut is standing 50 feet from a telephone pole in East Greenville, Virginia. She's armed with a small pile of rocks, and as she steps into her windup, she is emulating her heroes: Bob Feller, Carl Hubble, Dizzy Dean. Her target is just 12 inches across, smaller than home plate, although the telephone pole is quite a bit taller than the standard Major League strike zone. Faut brushes her sandy blonde hair back, pulls her baseball cap low, and launches a stone. A half second later, it connects with the pole, filling the air with a satisfying thwack. By the time of impact, Faut is already armed with another rock, ready to drill the innocent pole all over again. It will go on like this for some time, and it will last beyond the sunshine. Even in the darkness, she knows what a strike sounds like. Jean Faut is 16 years old in 1941, and when she's not pegging rocks at that telephone pole, she's exceptional at pretty much everything else she tries her hand at. Faut will go on to play first trumpet in her high school band, graduate as valedictorian, and star in track, field hockey, and basketball. But she won't love any of it as much as she loves baseball. During the summers, Faut will loiter around the baseball fields, at first watching over the practices of the semi-pro East Greenville team, before being invited to shag fly balls during batting practice. The first time she launches a ball back toward the infield, the action comes to a halt. All of the players realize it at once. This girl's got an arm. The semi-pro men's team recruits Faut to throw batting practice. The team's pitchers teach her a four-seam fastball, a curveball, a changeup. Sometimes, on a lark, they let the girl with the arm take batting practice off of the big boys. They take it easy on her at first, but when she keeps getting hits off of them, they start to take it more seriously. A deep breath, a windup, a fastball on the inside corner, and then a quick swing that loops the ball over the second baseman for a single. By 1945, Faut is 20 years old, and while the rest of the women her age are baking away in kitchens and starting traditional families, she is on the baseball field. Somewhere in the Midwest, there are teams of women playing a sport that looks a lot like baseball, but Jean Faut isn't there either. She's still on the field training with the men. In 1946, Faut finally accepted an invitation to try out for the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League, and when she got there, she was sorely disappointed. Most of the league's pitchers were still throwing underhand. She thought she was coming to play baseball. Scouts and managers noticed that the youngster from Pennsylvania had a cannon of an arm, the likes of which the young league had never seen. But underhand pitching was a trained skill that Faut didn't have. Her arm would have to play at third base where she could make the long toss across the diamond. And as for her bat, well, that would play anywhere. Jean Faut was assigned to South Bend, and as the league transitioned from underhand to sidearm pitching, the young third baseman started getting reps on the mound, making 12 appearances, and holding opposing teams to a sparkling 1.33 ERA. By the time her career was over, she'd post 5 seasons even better. Jean got married after that 1946 season to a man named Carl Winch, a washed-up pitching prospect who labored for 3 seasons as a Phillies minor leaguer without ever making it to the big leagues. The relationship was always bound to be fraught. Winch had never made it as a pitcher, getting shelled at every level of minor league ball before the Phillies cut him loose. His wife would go on to become the greatest pitcher in the history of her league. Winch was a harsh man, difficult to know, and maybe not the best communicator. Now it's spring of 1951, and Jean Faut arrives at spring training ready to begin a new season with the South Bend Blue Sox. You can imagine her surprise when she meets her new teammates, and then meets her new manager. His name is Carl Winch, and he'd never even told her the news. Hello and welcome to A Bend in Time, presented by the History Museum in South Bend. I'm your host, Aaron Helman, and during this series we're going to dive into the history of the South Bend Blue Sox, possibly the most storied franchise in the brief but shining history of the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League. During the course of this episode, you'll hear fictional advertisements for very real historical companies and products. We do that to help break up the podcast, provide some levity, to include just a little more history than we could otherwise, and to give you a sense of the time and place when and where all of this is happening. The absence of actual paid advertising is made possible by the generous underwriting of the entire series by the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League Players Association. And now, with all that out of the way, let's follow Jean Faut and the Blue Sox as they seek to bring a championship, or at the very least a playoff series victory, to the hometown fans in South Bend. The 1949 season arrived with more changes, but if the players in the league were used to anything, it was change. The baselines were moved to 72 feet, compared to 90 feet in Major League Baseball. The pitching mound was set at 55 feet, compared to 60 feet 6 inches in Major League Baseball. The size of the ball was reduced from 10 3/8 inches to an even 10, compared to 9 1/4 in the men's game. All of it was a delicately balanced optical illusion masterminded by league president Max Carey to make the women's league look and feel as fast as Major League Baseball. The tinkering was deemed necessary by the league's board of directors, a group of men who still weren't sold on the long-term tenability of the women's game. After all, the league had been launched as a hedge against the possibility that men's baseball would fold during the war. It hadn't, and now the war was over. All told, the league had attracted more than 900,000 fans the season before, but only one of its franchises turned a profit, the South Bend Blue Sox, who netted just $236 for their troubles. The league was changing, and so was the team and everyone around it. Betsy Jochum had retired in the offseason, leaving Bonnie Baker as the only hanger-on from the team's inaugural season. Marty McManus was out again as the team's manager, replaced by Dave Bancroft. Bancroft was a 16-year Major League veteran who'd twice received MVP votes and won a pair of World Series in 1921 and 1922 with the New York Giants. He'd go on to be inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame in 1971. A few weeks before the season kicked off in earnest, Jim Costin, longtime sports editor for the South Bend Tribune, passed away unexpectedly. Costin had been the team's biggest cheerleader and biggest critic since the very beginning, when the first game won over his skepticism based on the quality of play out on the diamond. The Blue Sox charged out of the gate, winning early and often during the first months of the season, buoyed by the bat of Jean Faut even more than her legendary arm. It was an all-time season for the South Bend superstar, who would finish the campaign as the league's top hitter and its second-best pitcher. As for the best hurler in the league that year, that award went to Lois Floreyk, a former South Bender now made a Rockford Peach, who had been a fan favorite for her all-out rough-and-tumble playing style. She'd been decent enough as a hitter, defender, and base runner, but it was when the league switched to overhanded pitching that she really began to shine. Floreyk didn't deal in subtlety or trickery on the mound. She didn't have an arsenal of pitches the way Jean Faut did. She didn't throw those pitches from a variety of angles. She just threw an overpowering fastball and dared hitters to catch up to it. Most of the time, they couldn't. If Jean Faut was Greg Maddux, then Lois Floreyk was Nolan Ryan. The rivalry made for good newsprint, and it was no surprise that their teams would be fighting for first place all year long. Rockford and South Bend traded first place every week, a nail-biter of a season and a thrill ride for fans in both cities. It's no surprise either that Rockford and South Bend were the only home ballparks that could reliably draw crowds. At its best, baseball's regular season is an edge-of-your-seat grind that delivers drama, action, and movement almost every day of the summer. That's what happened in 1949, a year when it felt like every game mattered, and more often than not, the Blue Sox were on the winning end of those games. The race for first place all came down to the season's final day. The South Bend Blue Sox woke up with a sterling record of 74-36. The Rockford Peaches woke up with the exact same record. South Bend won their game. Now all eyes were on the Peaches, and no one expected what would happen next. Facing the last-place Peoria Red Wings, Rockford was a heavy favorite coming into the game, and they didn't need help from the umpires to make their path any easier. But at least according to Peoria manager Leo Schral, the umps were firmly in the pockets of the Peaches. After one disputed call and another, Schral gathered up his players and marched off the field in protest. The umpire called the whole thing a forfeit and gave Rockford the victory. The season ended in a tie for first place. South Bend petitioned for a one-game playoff before the playoffs to determine which team would be declared the regular season champions. Max Carey shot down this idea and decided that the regular season and playoff title would be decided together. Whichever team won that matchup would take home all the marbles. The men in charge of planning the playoffs sure came up with an asinine doozy of a schedule for the year, one that wasn't to the benefit of either Rockford or South Bend. As the top two finishers, Rockford and South Bend would meet each other for a 7-game series in the first round of the playoffs. Teams finishing 3rd through 6th would battle it out for the right to play the winner of the South Bend-Rockford series in the championship. The AAGPBL had 2 dominant teams in 1949, but they would not be permitted to meet in the championship. Once again, the season ended in South Bend with a disappointing thud. The Blue Sox were swept out of the playoffs by the eventual champion Peaches, and as the sun set on the 7th season in South Bend, the home team still hadn't advanced beyond the first round of the playoffs. Voices were beginning to question if they ever would, or if their league would fold before they got the chance.
Come on out to the South Bend Motor Speedway tonight for 121 laps of championship midget auto races. Tickets for adults start at $1.50 and children are just $0.25. South Bend Motor Speedway is just 3 miles west of the city limits on Western Avenue, and the racetrack is where all the action is. And now, back to A Bend in Time, presented by the History Museum.
"1949 had been South Bend's most successful campaign to date, but it was also the year their league started to realize they were in trouble. Only 2 teams, the front-running South Bend and Rockford squads, had broken even that year, and league leadership blamed the problem on parity, or the lack thereof. As a result, there was a massive reshuffling of talent, decimating rosters across the league in hopes of evening the playing field. Dave Bancroft returned to helm a team that looked a lot different than the squad he'd had the year before, but he still had Jean Faut, and Jean Faut was, well, Jean Faut. After earning the award for the league's best hitter the year prior, she would finish the 1950 campaign as the circuit's best pitcher, going 21-9 with a 1.12 ERA. That was about the only bright spot for the team during a year that saw them finish with exactly as many wins as losses. They stumbled to a 5th-place finish and missed the playoffs. The playoff field had been reduced by 2 since the 6-team debacle of the year before. Worse still, the rebalancing didn't seem to fix the league. By mid-season, players on other teams, but not in South Bend, agreed to play games without the guarantee that they'd receive their full pay, or any pay at all. Fans were still turning out in South Bend, but the league's belt-tightening reached even into the Blue Sox dugout. First came the announcement that the league would no longer pay meal money, and then came the real devastating blow. In the middle of the season, the league orchestrated a deal that sent Bonnie Baker, the last remaining player from South Bend's inaugural squad, to Muskegon. The move left the team and the city heartbroken. For 8 years, Baker had been the backbone of the club. For 8 years, she had belonged to South Bend, and South Bend had belonged to her. Now she was gone, the result of a league trying to pinch pennies wherever it could. In Bonnie Baker, league officials saw a player with a deep knowledge of the game and well-developed leadership skills. When she arrived to play with her new team, they also made her the team's manager, a clever way to avoid paying an extra salary to a man on the bench. It would take an off-season before South Bend would recover from the blow. There was chaos in the Blue Sox front office. Harold Daly ran Bancroft out after the season, blaming his manager for the team's ills and accusing him of managing drunk on the job. He'd burned through 3 managers in 4 seasons and publicly accused 2 of them of being inebriated in the dugout. The team's board of directors decided the team needed a change, and they were about to shake things up in all of the best ways and all of the worst ones. Carl Winch was not a particularly well-liked man, and his marriage to Jean Faut was not a particularly happy one. Faut recalled later that there was some jealousy there. Winch had flamed out of his league, and Faut had ascended to becoming maybe the greatest player in the history of hers. Faut did not know that Winch was interested in the manager job, and she did not know he was ever a candidate until she found out, along with the rest of the team, that he'd been named the manager. And there was more. Faut, now just 25 years old, was also given duties as the team's chaperone, another way for team leadership to take a salary off of the books. Since Faut was married and a mother, the assumption was that she was mature enough to handle the extra duties assigned a chaperone. No one ever bothered to wonder if she had the time for it. Fout's life had become a sudden chaos, but she handled it with an outward grace. Being the manager's wife put her in an awkward spot with her teammates. Being the team's chaperone put her in an awkward spot with the board of directors. And being married to Carl Winch put her in an awkward spot wherever he was, which now was everywhere she was, too. There was just one place in the whole world where everything would slow down, where the athlete could be alone with her thoughts, where she was in complete control of everything inside her and everything around her. A pitcher's mound in a baseball stadium filled with screaming fans. The season couldn't start soon enough. Once again, the league had reshuffled its postseason, separating the campaign into 2 halves like they had in years past, and putting the top 2 teams from each half into a bracket. The Blue Sox finished second during the first half, but they were hungry for more. Jean Faut, most of all. On Friday, July 21st, in front of nearly 1,500 fans at Playland Park, Jean Faut authored what was then the finest pitching performance in the history of the young league, a perfect game to beat the Rockford Peaches. No runs, no hits, no walks, no errors, no one safe at first, for 9 consecutive innings. Paul Neville, writing for the Tribune, called it this way: Jean Faut, a sturdy gal with a lot of heart, a fastball that hops, and a curve that breaks off like a country road, pitched a perfect no-hit, no-run game to subdue the Rockford Peaches 2-0 at Playland Park Saturday night. The game kicked off a winning streak that propelled the team into first place. When that streak ended, the team started another one. A 16-game winning streak the next month would keep them at the top of the league for good. The Blue Sox were back in the playoffs, and more than ever, Jean Faut didn't want to go back home. She would drag the team to victory if she had to. We'll follow the Blue Sox into the playoffs right after the break.
Come on down to Chikar's at 533 South Michigan Street and feast your eyes on the brand new 145 square inch Zenith Burke TV console. With a Super Ranger chassis and automatic single knob tuning, This is the television set you've been waiting for, and now you can buy the set, all accessories, and get it installed for just $399.95. You're going to buy a TV someday, why not today? And why not at Chakar's? And now, back to A Bend in Time, presented by the History Museum.
The 1951 Blue Sox finished with a record of 76-36, the best mark in the league, but they weren't content to hold on to an imaginary regular season championship. The playoffs were looming, and those were the games that counted. First up, a 3-game tilt against the Fort Wayne Daisies for the right to advance to the championship series. For reasons that were never made clear, 2 of the games would be hosted by the lower-seeded Fort Wayne club, ratcheting up the pressure that much more on the ladies from South Bend. The matchups went the way the South Bend team had come to expect. Jean Faut, who would later be named the league's Player of the Year, started the first game, and the only one to be played at Playland Park, and led her team to a 2-1 victory in the short series. Faut didn't pitch in the second game in Fort Wayne, and the Blue Sox lost 9-1. Faut was back on the hill for the third and final game, in hostile territory, with the season's hopes riding on the strength of her right arm and the weight of years of playoff disappointment stacked on her shoulders. She pitched a gem, a complete game and then some, in a 2-1 10-inning thriller that propelled the South Bend Blue Sox into the championship series. They would meet the league's juggernaut, the Rockford Peaches, the most successful team in the history of the league, and the same ones who had bounced South Bend from the playoffs in 1949. The championship would go 5 games, and whichever team could win 3 of them would take home the crown. With Fout's arm still shot from her 10-inning performance against Fort Wayne, the Peaches raced out to quick victories in the first 2 games of the series. For not the first time, and not the last time, the team turned to Jean Faut to stem the bleeding. She did not disappoint, staving off elimination for one more day with 11 strikeouts in a 3-2 victory. A day later, the Blue Sox won again, a rain-shortened 6-3 victory that delivered the series to a decisive Game 5 at Playland Park. The Blue Sox raced out to a quick 6-2 lead by the third inning, and Carl Winch wasn't about to take any chances at losing the margin. In the bottom of the third, he marched out to the mound and subbed in his wife and his team's biggest star. Jean Faut took the mound tethered to a 4-run lead and didn't allow any hits or any runs the rest of the way. The final score was 10-2. A few thousand fans streamed onto the field to celebrate with their heroines. At long last, the South Bend Blue Sox had delivered a championship to South Bend. Hey, thanks for joining us on A Bend in Time presented by the History Museum in South Bend. There's more history waiting for you at historymuseumsb.org. And if you want to know anything else about the All-American League, the History Museum should be your first stop. The History Museum serves as the national repository for the AAG-PBL Players Association. I'm your host, Aaron Helman. The theme music is Whose Distance Is It Anyway by Neil Carmichael. Tune in for our next episode as we charge into the 1950s and follow the Blue Sox through the ups and downs of their league and the charge to bring a championship to South Bend. I hope you'll join us for that one next. Until then, keep learning new things and remember, everything is fascinating as long as you stay curious.